Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilmember Cheryl Davila, Berkeley City Council, the representative of District 2. And welcome to the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force final virtual summit series for an environmentally just and regenerative future. Today's topic is, where do we go from here for climate justice? And so I just wanted to let you all know that this will be the last time that you'll see me as an elected official. I term out in December, but it's been an amazing journey. 4 years, it's great. It's been great. You know, I've gotten a lot of legislation done, and I look forward to the future. But we're going to continue the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. And so I just wanted to let everyone know that. But right now, we're going to move over to a land acknowledgement and welcome Karina Gould, who is the tribal spokeswoman for the Confederated Villages of Lejeune Ohlone. She is born and raised in Oakland and in her ancestral homeland, the Ohlone territory of Hushin. And Karina has worked on preserving and protecting the ancient burial grounds of her ancestors throughout the Bay Area for decades. She is the co-founder and co-director of Socorro Land Trust. Thank you, Karina, for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Councilwoman Cheryl Davila, who has been our champion at Berkeley, has worked with our tribe to move many things, has supported us in saving the West Berkeley Shell Mound, has stood with us at the Emeryville Shell Mound, has put through legislation to change signs in the city of Berkeley, has put murals down on our streets acknowledging Ohlone territory. I just want to thank you so much for all of the hard work, and I can hope that we continue to work together side by side for many years. Even though you're not in this position, doesn't mean that your work is not invaluable and not, you know, I just love you, Cheryl. And so I thank you so much for the work that you've done and putting together this summit for the last 4 years. And I thank you for allowing us to be a part of that and remembering our relationships together, and this land acknowledgement, and not just during Native American Heritage Month, but throughout the years that you've been holding up our relationship and our works together. So thank you so much for your just being an incredible human being. So thank you. Horshe Tuhi. Shanka Ka'atra Karina. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you so much for being here today. And as we're folding up this year in COVID, and we're going back into what we call during this time of year hibernation, a time for the earth to go to sleep, a time for us to reflect, a time for us to gather together. We won't be gathering together so much with family this year. And but I want us to remember that there's going to be a springtime where new things grow, where seeds will be planted, where flowers will bloom, and we'll have fresh air and good rains, and that we'll be able to see each other again in the physical form. And so I just want to offer a prayer right now and say thank you for this day. And so, grandmothers and grandfathers, we thank you for this day and for our lives and for the good work that's coming. We thank you for allowing us to create today. We ask that we open up our minds, our hearts, and our ears together so that we can create a better future for the next 7 generations and beyond. We ask that you continue to bless us with health and all the good things we need, and that our minds come together as human beings, as one race, to take care of those that are living on the streets and doing without. We ask that we take care of those that are behind the walls and that are being affected by tyranny right now. We ask that we are able to help those out that have less than us. We ask that we have good waters for the next 7 generations and beyond, good airs to breathe for the next 7 generations beyond, good soils to grow food and medicines for the next 7 generations and beyond, and that we take care of each and every one of our, whatever we need in our hearts right now, that you take care of those things, and that we have a good end of this year and a good fortunes going into the next year as we take care of each other and our families, and we take care of this world together, creating solutions that will help out the next generations. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karina. I love you too. And it's been just such a blessing to have you at all of our events. Appreciate it so much. All right. So now we're going to move on. And I also wanted to just thank, the planning committee, planning and logistics, Jack Flex, Steve Nadell, Ruth Abbey, everyone, Amos, all the, everyone that's been involved in the climate emergency mobilization. My son Armando, who actually Googled climate emergency and got this ball rolling for climate, the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force virtual series has been super successful. We've had 900 unique people join, 76 Bay Area cities out of the 101 in the region, 27 states other than California, and 8 countries other than the United States. So we've had a big reach, and we'll continue to do so. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Amos, and we'll take it away.
Good. Thank you very much, Cheryl, and thank you for convening this and really holding space for all of us to come together as a policy group and as a movement here in the Bay Area. Really do appreciate serving as your vice chair here and all the work that you've done to help pull this together, especially pulling these teams together, our planning and our program and logistics team, as well as the others. And thank you for all the elected officials who are on and those who are here from the beginning, Eduardo et al., and really pulling this together. We are the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, we're a Bay Area coalition of elected officials, city, county staff, environmental activists, social activists, frontline communities, CBOs as well, addressing the inequities and causes of the climate emergency here. For those of you who haven't visited us, please write down and save for yourself our website here at the very beginning. CEMTF.org. That's for Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. That's at www.cemtf.org. And you can follow us, our developments, and actually we put up our meeting notices as well. And we'll be hosting, or not hosting, but announcing our next events, actions, and series. This is the 5th of our 2020 summit series that we've put on. Our virtual summit series for an environmentally just and regenerative future. Our first summit we held in July. The topic was sustainable and healthy cities. There we had panels on city and regional planning, having to do with housing, ecological protection, Green New Deal, and more. Resiliency was one as well. In August, our second summit was entitled Fossil Fuel Free Bay Area. Really drilling down on with panels on decommissioning California refineries. We had an I Can't Breathe Bay Area air quality and environmental justice panel. Another panel on controlling carbon pollution, and really good exchanges in all of these summits, I should say, and with these panels that we've had. Our third summit was September, focusing on green infrastructure, all electric buildings, transportation, 100% renewable energy. We had zero waste discussions on focusing on plastic pollution and waste food reduction. If any of you were following that, or if that's your field of specialty, we had a carbon sequestration group that really dealt with carbon farming and alternative strategies, and one that dealt with watershed, and another on consumption-based GHG accounting. So we've really covered the gambit if you will, on areas and industries that one are impacting frontline communities, but also that we really need to bring into the discussion as we do seek to both shape and influence policymakers and municipalities and agencies here as their policies do impact our communities, but also as we're looking for you to begin to start conversations with people who you do meet and who you do see here in our participants. Go ahead and click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen there, and you can scroll through. I encourage everyone, if you do, to right click on your own profile and rename yourself. Don't just put your name there. Put your full name there so people can meet you. We are in a mediated space here in Zoom, but just like we would in any other conference, try to put the name of your organization afterward or an abbreviated form of it. Like I have here, Vice Chair CEMTF, so people can better identify and try to make a connection. We are here to facilitate a conversation and collaboration. And we hope you can make those connections so that we can continue conversations and start building policy initiatives together amongst our municipalities and organizations. Today at our November summit, again, our focus now is on where do we go from here for climate justice. I'm not going to steal any thunder this time for our panelists or our speakers for today, but we are going to have an inspiring message that I know we've sought after Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's really led in this area and in our nation. Most of us like to think and see, and we're going to hear a message from her. We're also going to hear from Carl Anthony with Breakthrough Communities and former president of Earth Island Institute. He'll be followed up by Saul Griffith, who is the author of Rewiring America, speaking on how to fund the clean energy economy here. Eduardo Martinez, our own Richmond City Council member and one of the co-founding members of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force, will follow Saul. And finally at 9:30 or somewhere thereafter, we'll hear from John Joya, Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors, and on the California Air Resources Board. With that, I'm going to keep it short. We do have an action-packed, if you will, plenary for you today, and we'll get things going from here. With that, I would ask either Jack or one of our co-hosts to cue up the message from Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, proudly representing the beautiful 13th Congressional District of California. First, thank you to the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force for bringing everyone together to do this very critical work. The question we are asking today, where do we go from here for climate justice, is one of the most important questions facing the incoming Biden-Harris administration and the 117th Congress. In fact, it is one of the most important questions facing humanity at this moment in our history. I'm hopeful, though, because on January 20th, we will have an administration that really does believe in facts and science and reality. That alone will be a major change from the last 4 years when we were dealing with a White House that was not just denying the reality of climate change, but was literally doing everything in its power to exacerbate this crisis. I'm hopeful because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ran on the most ambitious climate plan ever proposed by a major party nominee, and about 80 million people voted for that plan. I am hopeful that we will win in Georgia again and have the Senate with us in this fight. And yes, I'm hopeful because on day one, President Biden can immediately take actions like reversing Trump's rollbacks of regulations and rejoining the Paris Agreement. In California, and especially in the Bay Area, we can and we must continue to lead the way for the rest of the country. As you know, this was the worst wildfire season we have ever seen in California. It breaks my heart to see so much damage to our state, so much hardship on top of the COVID crisis, so many deaths, so many injuries to our first responders. Also, the economic collapse that we're already dealing with. In California alone, fires burned more than 4.1 million acres, destroyed at least 10,488 homes and other structures, and led to at least 31 deaths. Those numbers aren't just for 2020, and they will continue to get worse in coming years unless we reverse course. This is the climate emergency that scientists have been warning us about for decades. It's here now. So let's continue to make the Bay Area a model for the rest of the nation in addressing this emergency by doing everything we can locally, from supporting clean energy in our cities to electrifying vehicle fleets to a statewide Green New Deal. Thank you again to everyone here for the work you are doing to protect our state and our planet. And yes, I look forward to working with you to pursue climate justice in the upcoming year. Thank you again.
Very much, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and thank you, Alex, for presenting her today. We really appreciate her participation and her inspirational and on-point message. I'm so glad to hear both her reference to the incoming administration and its focus on getting back into the Paris Agreement and focus on climate here, as I'm sure many of us are. Next, I should say.
Oh, Amos,
yeah,
if I could just, I think Alex might have a couple of comments about legislation that Barbara is introducing. Alex, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I do want to. So the first thing I just want to I want to say is, you know, this is a priority for Congresswoman Lee. And I just want to have a line of communication to this group and to everybody on this call. You know, we want to hear from you guys about anything we should be paying attention to or involved in here in the East Bay or anywhere else nationally. So I just want to say that you know, at the outset here is I will somehow get my contact information up here on the Jack, do you think you could post my my contact info in the chat bar?
Yeah, I'll look for it. I'll post it. I don't have it right now, but I'll find it. Yeah.
Okay, great. And so we you know, I'm always very happy to hear from anybody about any environmental issues in the district. That's part of my job here in Oakland. So, so that said, that, you know, there are some bills that Congresswoman Lee is sponsoring right now, and I can just mention a few if that is if you'd like to hear that. But, you know, in the bigger picture, she is a very strong supporter of the Green New Deal. She's one of the first people to come out for that. And she is, like I said, this is a top priority for her. You know, trying to get some really bold and really ambitious legislation passed in this next Congress, whether or not, you know, we have a Senate who is going to go along with this. There's, you know, there's action we can take. And so she's, you know, she's definitely going to be, we're definitely going to be working on that. So that said, we do have some legislation that we're sponsoring now. For example, there's this, the Zero Emission Vehicles Act. If you're familiar with that, Congresswoman Lee is now a sponsor of that. That's I believe that's the legislation that has the goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Let's see, she's also on the Clean Water for All Act, DeFazio's bill. She's sponsoring the Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act right now, which is HR 8632. You know, which has a number of things in it about, reducing climate impact. The Clean Federal Fleet Act, which seems like a kind of a no-brainer. That the federal government should be leading the way on low emissions vehicles. So right now, those are the current bills that are, there's a few more, but those are kind of the big ones. And like I said, we are open to any ideas or suggestions about legislation from the group. So, please feel free to contact me about anything that you guys are working on or interested in.
Good. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate that. And again, thank the Congresswoman for us all here. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes, but I do have to go at about 9:30. Good.
Next up, we will hear from Carl Anthony. Carl Anthony is, Carl is with Breakthrough Communities. As I said before, he's also the former president of Earth Island Institute. Carl, you can unmute yourself there.
I'm happy to be here and to talk about where we go from here. And I think one of the really pressing issues, or multiple pressing issues, is how we can begin to construct an economy that goes to scale for the activities that we have been involved in. Most recently, we've been working on the sea level rise. As you know, BCDC, which is the agency that has been in the leadership of planning for the Bay, has initiated this process by which we are going to begin planning for the regional impact of sea level rise, which will have big effects on many aspects of our community areas. A major concern that we have is really addressing the impacts on communities of color and communities that are located along the bay, along the shoreline. And these communities will be catching the impact of the sea level rise and flooding. We're looking at West Oakland and the West Oakland Indicators Project has created a shoreline plan for that area. And we'll be looking at the negative impacts of the potential flooding that are faced by the housing activities along the shoreline. We're looking at Marin City and the issues that people in Marin have been facing, the flooding. Flooding has occurred in places along East Palo Alto, in the areas that are in close proximity to the sea, the bay. And then also we've been very concerned about the potential of the spreading of toxic pollution, radioactive activity in places that have been now becoming exposed because of the flooding that goes on, that flooding is engaged in mixing the toxic pollution throughout the bay and is affecting not only those sites that were in the Bayview, Hunters Point, Shipyard, and other areas by the Green Action Group has been focused on for the past several years. So we've been working with all of these groups, looking at the potential of interacting with the cleanup of those areas as priority areas. Much of the cleanup that is needed for addressing these issues, particularly because we don't know when the flooding will begin to take place or really hit a high level. And the cleanup is really an essential consideration. But I think we also have to be thinking of going forward of the economic impact of the sea level rise on the destruction of housing that's located along the shoreline park, the shoreline of the Bay area. And the biggest concern that we need to be thinking about is what to do about the housing stock that will be damaged and the health and safety of the people who occupied in that in those areas who will then be displaced and have to face the housing issues that their housing will be destroyed and become a source of additional pressure on the neighborhoods and communities that have been surrounded in those areas. But a big issue that we really have to face is how can the green economy begin to take up the slack for those communities that have been most affected, and we have to begin to put the priority on the economic opportunities that will be emerging in the next several decades. As you know, the majority of the population of the country is shifting to a majority minority population by the year 2040. We expect the majority of people in this country will be people of color. And so the preceding period had a great deal of segregation of the minority people from the rest of the population in the construction of segregated neighborhoods, and which had enormous impact on the economic opportunities and the schooling of the young people in the educational system, and many health impacts that came from the concentration of poverty in those neighborhoods. In the last couple of years, those neighborhoods that had been really exposed to the segregation have been displaced now by many middle and upper income communities that are looking for places to live, and who have been concentrated, who have been have been facing the challenges. The middle income people have moved into many of those places now, and the people the people of color who've been isolated in places like Oakland and San Francisco and Richmond and other communities have now been displaced and moved out to Antioch and Pittsburgh and places throughout the lower the middle suburbs that were where the previously the African American community and Latino communities were begun to move outward to those suburban communities, and they're now creating activities to really deal with the kind of new pressures of arriving in communities without the infrastructure, without the transportation to get back into the inner city areas where the jobs were located, and now having to find new ways to create an economy that works for them and works for all in those regions. I want to say that a big challenge that we have had is that as the civil rights movement of the 60s declined and the environmental movement had begun to replace the civil rights movement, there was a kind of a very strong impulse to try to protect the environmental movement from the communities of color that were really advocating for our survival, and that in the early stages of the environmental movement, there was this concentration of efforts to really show that the environmental movement really was not concerned with the issues of communities of color. And we actually had the beginnings of the emerging environmental movement that was trying to show its separation from the civil rights movement. And now 30 or 40 years later, all of the all of the environmental movement have been faced with the paradox of having a real separation and concentration of white organizations putting a great deal of effort into the environmental movement, and the general perception that people of color were not interested in the environment. And we're now faced with the situation that there's so many people who are in the environmental movement who are white people, and we have been faced with the reality that the racial struggles that have emerged in the last 30 or 40 years, which came to a head with the death of George Flores I believe it was in July of this year, had the most powerful movement of people throughout the whole culture, including Europeans and people of color, that created a nationwide protest against the killing of George Flores. Has focused much of the attention of the nation on the issues of police brutality, which has been going on for a long time, but has reached a pivotal point in public awareness and temporarily occupied our public attention until the corona pandemic that that struck this year took over the airwaves, and we found less focus on the environmental and the climate change issues. But now we see that the same conditions that were prevalent in the environmental justice and climate justice movement are exhibited in those issues that emerged in the pandemic, so that many people who are vulnerable to the climate change issues, we can see they actually hit the poor people in communities of color 3 or 4 times the strength of those communities are as compared to the general population that is affected by the corona pandemic. So we're beginning to see that those issues are really so much connected with the climate justice and the environmental justice issues that the question now is, how do we build a future that is going to be generating jobs and economic opportunities for those neighborhoods and communities that have long been isolated. And as we go forward, we have the challenge of building opportunities for those neighborhoods and communities for new economic growth. And I think the interest in the Green New Deal is suggesting that we should combine all of these issues in a major series of events and activities that really address the economic opportunities for overcoming the concentration of economic activity and wealth among the top 1% and displacing the large group of people, the 99%, that includes all populations in the area that are struggling with survival. So the major activity that we will be engaged in the next decades is linking solutions to environmental questions with the economic opportunities that are potentially on the horizon. So as we go into this area more, we see that the opportunities and the issues facing all of the communities are simultaneously emerging. So I think that the basic thing that we now need to think about is how we mobilize the most vulnerable populations to get some of the economic benefits that have been on the horizon, but not been realized by communities of color. And we think that these opportunities are where we need to put most of our activity in addressing these the issues of the communities that we have previously protesting much of the negative environments. We now need to also begin to build in a positive way the outcomes that will exist for the communities to thrive and be successful in an economy that's built around the climate justice and environmental justice of all these communities. So I think we're looking forward to engaging with all of the groups to ensure that our activities addressing our electrification, transportation, regenerative farming, all of the activities that have been isolated and demonstrated in different locations will become the dominant economic activity for the period in the later part of the 21st century. So I thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me and to engage in the discussion that is going to be coming forth following that. So thank you very much.
Good. And thank you, Carl. We really appreciate your work and all that you and your team have put together and bringing this forward for us. And such a apt segue, I should say as well, to Saul Griffith. Saul is the author of Rewiring America, speaking on, well, he will be speaking on how to fund the clean energy economy here. He's written many books and articles, and we're excited to hear his views on how to finance the clean energy transformation without saying so much. So I would ask Saul, please join us here, and looking forward to hearing what you have for us today.
Good morning, Amos. Can I just, it's 4 a.m. where I am, so I'm a little muddled. Can you remind me how much time I have?
I think, Jack, correct me or not, about 12, 15 minutes. You good? Or are we longer?
Yeah, well, we said 10 to 13 minutes and maybe time for a question or two, but if you take all 15, then there won't be any questions. So we'll see.
Yeah, 4 a.m. The ball's in your court.
All right.
Thanks for being here at 4 a.m. My goodness.
We really appreciate it.
To be close to my aging parents, we relocated to Australia temporarily. And so I'm calling in from Wollongong. Here we go. I'll share my screen. Very kind of you to talk to me, to invite me to talk about finance, but you've asked a physicist to talk about finance. So I'll give you a warning that I'm going to throw in a little bit of the science and some engineering as a way to talk about the opportunities and challenges in financing this. And I think it gives a lot of insight into the justice issues. All right. Okay, here we go. This famous Sankey diagram, it in fact was invented in the 70s to find out exactly how to solve that energy crisis. That energy crisis was the supply crisis because of the Arab oil embargo. And so they were looking at what do we have to do on the left-hand side of this diagram, which is the supply side, so that we don't disrupt the right-hand side, which is how we use energy. Electricity generation here, residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation. We didn't really change that view, and we've been using that view in some respects to think about how to fix climate change. But we really need to think about the supply side, because it's a truism that as you decarbonize the left-hand side, you need to decarbonize the right-hand side at the same rate. But in fact, if you think about it from the right-hand side, demand side backwards, it gives you new opportunities. I'm just going to flash this next slide up. We did this work with the Department of Energy. This is the same diagram, but when you literally can focus down to, how much energy school buses use, or retail food distribution, or mobile homes, versus things. So we now have that level of resolution to look at the economy, and we did that in order to figure out the best, fastest decarbonization pathways. As a quick reminder, I heard people bandy about 2050. We're going to have to keep ratcheting up our level of effort. At this point, if we started with a World War II level of effort next year, we need to be pretty much completed with decarbonization by 2040. That's if we want to hit any target under 2 degrees. There are 2 problems with the way IPCC has modeled the world and our decarbonization trajectories. One is that in the early 2000s, we allowed negative emissions to be modeled in. Let's be very frank and very honest. We do not know how to do those at scale, and not a lot of serious scientists believe we will do it economically at scale in time. The other is that we don't model in the carbon that will be emitted by machinery, including your car and your furnace and your stovetop, that already exist. that's called committed emissions. In fact, the committed emissions of the stock of machinery we already have takes us over 1.5 and perilously close to 2 degrees. What that really means is that we need to now care about something called the adoption rate. These are the technology adoption rates of things throughout history. So this dotted line here was the adoption of the landline. It took about 80 years to get one everywhere. This this black line over here is, or the gray one is the adoption rate of the cell phone. So we went from no cell phones to nearly everyone had one in 20 years. Let me be very clear. We need to go from very few electric cars to everyone has one in 20 years. And the wind down of landlines in the same period needs to apply to internal combustion engines. Why is that? These are various adoption rates you can imagine. A magic 1 means we wake up tomorrow and we've decarbonized. That would be great. That'll stop us at 1 degree. If we did 100% replacement at an end of life, so every time we retire a coal plant, every time we retire natural gas, we replace it in solar and wind. But it also means every time we retire an automobile, it needs to be replaced with an electric one. Every time we retire a furnace in a basement, it needs to be replaced with an electric heat pump. And honestly, you can now look at that in the context of our climate outcome. That retire everything gets us between 1.5 to 2 degrees, but there'll be some ramp up because we are 10 to 20 times below the production rates required to get those machines built. So we'll need a rapid sort of World War II industrialization effort. And that puts us on this dotted line here that just narrowly squeaks us below 2 degrees. So that needs to be our level of ambition. Quick piece of good news about electrification. If you electrify everything, you start with an economy out here. This is what happens when you decarbonize the electricity sector. This is what happens when you decarbonize transportation. In terms of the energy reduction, same with electrifying heat in homes. You come all the way down here. The US can actually have the same lifestyles that it does today and at about 40% of the energy use. Now, we could argue that we should try to improve everyone's lifestyle and go up to 50. But the overwhelming message here is that there's a big win in electrification. To switch to finance and economics, here's the reality of an average, this is the average, not the median US household today. $61,000, there's 2.6 people in that average household. $61,000 is what they spend after tax. A lot of that goes on things like housing and transportation, big vague categories, but you can break this down as you go further out to the right, and you can see gasoline. We spend $2,000 a year on gasoline. That's more than they spend on all the fresh food, all the fresh meat, all the fresh vegetables in the average house. $1,500 electricity is more than we spend on all of education in the average household. We spend $400 or about $550 on heating fuels, which is more than we spend on dentistry today, just to contextualize what we're going to talk about. You can actually look state by state at these expenditures, and you can even look at how they are today. The purple bar here is gasoline, the red is natural gas, the yellow is electricity. So this is how households spend money on energy across the country. And that'll be important in a minute. So, quick reminder, because you need to get to this level of specificity to make some interesting points about finance. This is the average home. It has heating oil or natural gas heating it. It has natural gas typically heating the stove. It has natural gas typically heating the hot water heater, and it has 2 cars in the garage running on diesel or gas. To get to the future we need households to look like this. Same 2 cars, but running on electricity with electric car chargers. Rooftop solar to the maximum amount of penetration we can, a heat pump for space heat, and a heat pump for water heat in the garage, probably a battery in every home. And all of this will require an upgrade to what's called the load center, or what you might know as the fuse box. So how do we get from where we are to there? How much is that going to cost is a very important question. The good news is, just like I showed you the big savings at the national level, the current household uses about 80,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year. The future household, without changing the quality of your life in any way, will only need 20 to 25. So we get nearly a better than 3x reduction in total quantity of energy. That's the efficiency of electrification alone. So that's the good news story. Again, you can model that for every single household in the country. And it's the reason we model out the electricity use in every house as we electrify everything is we can now build an economic model of how we get to that future. Just for a quick reminder, all of the technologies that we care about, heat pumps, solar, batteries, electric vehicles, are on things known as learning rates. And a learning rate historically is defined as how much does the cost of something fall every time you double the rate of production. Solar, every time we double the rate of production of solar, we get a 22% discount. With batteries, it's 21%. With wind power, it's 17%. We need to have an 8x increase in the production rate of batteries. We need a 12x increase in the production rate of wind. We need a 16x increase in the production rate of solar. That means 3 or 4 doublings each. That means the cost of these things, just by virtue of the scale of the project to decarbonize humanity alone, more than halves the price again from where we are today, which is great news. Here, however, is the problem. If you took that household today and you went out and you tried to buy all of the capital upgrades, and this is not the whole purchase, this just means when you go to buy a heat, your water heater breaks tomorrow, you go to buy a water heater, instead of paying for the cheapest natural gas burning one, you pay the difference in price between the electric heat pump version and the current natural gas version. So we're just paying for the difference in keeping your current household lifestyle, but if you wanted to do it electrically, that would cost $80,000 a year for the average, $80,000 worth of capital investment for the average household. That puts us out of the range of where we need to be by a lot. In fact, as I'll show you later, it increases household energy costs by about $5,000 a year. By about 2024, if you had the right recipe of regulatory fixes, and I'm to emphasize regulatory fixes, I can buy solar installed on my roof in Australia today without government subsidy for under $1 per watt installed. That translates to a cost of electricity of 5 cents per kilowatt hour. In the US, the average cost of installation unsubsidized of solar is $3 to $3.50 per watt. It's the same solar cells, and in fact, you have lower salaries in Australia. Australia has a typical salary for a solar installer of $35 to $45 per hour, which is higher than what it is in the US. So this is all a regulatory own goal, if you like, in the US. It comes from our permitting challenges around solar, and it comes from inspection requirements. Australia's magic recipe was a training and certification program, which is to underscore that we need massive training and certification programs for all of the critical components of decarbonisation to not only build the workforce, but to lower what's called the soft costs. Anyway, if you had Australia's recipe for solar, California's recipe for electric vehicles, and where heat pumps are going, by about 2024, we get that capital cost down from 80,000 to 30,000, and by about 2028 to about 15,000. That's very important because of this. This is the sort of what we're doing. Here is, I'm circling the current household, $4,500 a year. The blue, a little over 1,500 or a little under 1,500 on the grid, and the rest is on the fossil fuels. And that's an annual payment that you have to make to buy those fuels. The big game we're playing here is we're substituting finance for fuels. So currently the machines are cheap, but the fuels are expensive into the future. The electrification we need is expensive machines up front that are essentially free in the future. So that means we're going to be paying via finance. Today, if you went out and you bought all of these, you decarbonized your home, it's this business as usual model. You'd spend this big blue block here on your capital, and then you'd be paying interest on that forever, and it would cost you around about $5,000 extra per year. But the great news is, once we get to good or great, you'll see $1,000 in savings by 2024 per household if we do this right, and we'll see $2,500 in savings per household per year by 2028. That is a very significant amount of money to those average homes. And remember that the median household is probably probably only has about $40,000 in spending. So it's very substantial to the median home. So there's the opportunity. We can actually use these numbers, and I'm going to purposely cut it short so that I can make more commentary on this than just show you slides and data. But up here, we actually worked with some professional economists to figure out how this creates jobs. Maybe I'll go to the end goal. Nationwide, just focusing on the household. Today, you would create negative net jobs. Why is that? You would create a huge amount of jobs in manufacturing there in blue, a huge amount in installation, and some in finance. But because the households have to spend more money, you lose the household spending that is also a job creator. By the time we get to good, you're creating 6 million new jobs in the economy. And by the time we get to this great, 7 to 8 million new jobs in the economy. Now, these are not jobs that you can export as much. These are jobs that are going to be in every zip code, because essentially they're contracted jobs. They're jobs that have to go into your basement, into your garage, into your kitchen to do installations. And so these are local jobs. They're well-paying, skilled trade jobs, and there's a lot of them. So there's a great news story there. We can actually do those job numbers by state. In California alone, that is 600 to 800,000 jobs, new jobs created. To talk about the climate impact of this, and then to come back to finance, the energy decisions made in the household account for 37%, because it's the emissions from the heating systems in the house, the electricity systems in the house, and the vehicle. What I've just told you will get us around 40% of the way to our net zero target, and it is achievable in about 15 years and keeps us on track for 2 degrees. If you applied this same recipe to our small businesses and commerce, you'd get an additional 18 to 20. So there's 60% out of the 85% of our emissions which are energy based. So this is really lets us tackle the majority of emissions in a way that we can talk directly to people about the jobs created and directly to people around their kitchen table issues, so the air quality inside their house and inside their communities. Maybe this is the slide to now switch the conversation to finance. We looked at what is the break-even interest rate. So at what interest rate can you finance these goods in the home that breaks even on household economics? Given today's technology, you have to have a negative interest rate because they are more expensive than the incumbent. Again, about half of that problem is a regulatory own goal. So making these things easy to install and eliminating the soft cost permitting inspection will get us about halfway there. Scale will get us another 25% of the way there. And the last thing we need is a low interest rate. The great news, however, is that once we get to the good scenario, the break-even interest rate looks like above 4%. So it starts to be retail, either for good or bad, for bad reasons, but good for climate change. The economic depression has taken interest rates to the lowest they've ever been. So maybe COVID has given us a head start here, because interest rates are now 0 to 3%, and they look globally, and they look like they're going to lock in. And so that's really, at a macroscopic view of the finance, the interest rates are in a good position. I'm going to remind everyone that maybe the most important and long-lasting piece of legislation that FDR made during the original New Deal was the invention of Fannie Mae in 1936. Before 1936, the 20-year mortgage as we know it didn't exist. And we used to finance homes on balloon payment mortgages. When the market crashed, these balloon payments that came due every 5 years were coming due, and people would lose their homes. Not only that, but 25% of the American first workforce worked in construction. So they want the federal government and FDR wanted to put money back into communities, and they wanted to put money back into building. And so they invented and conceived of the modern 20-year mortgage, largely based on the auto loan that Alfred P. Sloan invented to elevate GM over Ford in the auto loan world. The invention of the federally backed mortgage basically was a declaration that the American home was part of the American infrastructure. What I'm really trying to say is an incredibly important piece of what we can do in a Green New Deal is declare that the rest of these electric devices should be given that same unique status as the home, which means that the federal government can guarantee it. That gives access to low credit households, low credit rating households much more easily, and gives us an opportunity to afford these high ticket items. Many people from the climate justice movement will probably be aware that the way we rolled out the mortgages and financing in this country was by no means colorblind and was quite problematic. We absolutely have to do that better this time, but we know what went wrong last time and we have an opportunity to fix it. Maybe I'll just come back to this original. Slide. I'm going to finish with the household we need to end up with, because we can make some interesting.
Oh God, one at a time, Jesus.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, I got that one already.
Here we go. Let's look at these devices. Stoves and ovens, water heaters, air conditioners, it's understood, are typically purchased under distress. So the piece of machinery fails. The average, 40% of American homes have less than $400 to tap in case of an emergency. It's probably the middle of winter or the middle of summer, and you probably have a pregnant house member who says, I need a stove tomorrow, or I need a hot water heater tonight. And so the purchasing experience for people is they go to find the cheapest one they can afford, which ends up being a natural gas burning or a fossil fuel burning device. That is to emphasize that I gave you this macroscopic idea about financing, and then yes, we'd like to macroscopically get a federally guaranteed rate and have everything bought on mortgage, but it's worthy to say that we need to think about the point of purchase experience. We need this financing to be available at the point of purchase so that the technologies that we need for the future are cheaper as you buy them, for everyone who needs it. And in a strange way, how I've come to see these LMI, low middle income, access to these technology issues, it comes down to how we shape point of purchase finance and novel payment schemes to make sure that the right technology is cheaper for the household. I think it's also incredibly important to note that there are three sets of people who could benefit from those savings, those household savings I told you about, that $1,000 to $2,500. There are three people lining up to try and get that money. One of them are the banks who'd like to make that money as their margin in finance. One of them are the companies that would like to sell you or lease you these pieces of machinery. And then the third player, which is the one that I hope wins the economic benefit, is the household itself. And so we really need to think about the financing schemes that allow and enable the homeowners or the renters to end up owning these pieces of infrastructure for themselves. So they're benefiting from these big energy savings into the future and taking that economic benefit into their household. I'll stop there. There's a lot of thoughts. I think I just fire hosed you all with a whole lot. And I'm very happy to take questions. And honestly, these are early days where we're still working through these issues and brainstorming. So I appreciate everyone's experience on this call in helping shape new ideas that we can turn into local and federal policies to get the future we all deserve.
All. This is just personally from me to you. People say when I get done presenting, it's like drinking from a fire hose. That was Niagara Falls, my friend. That was awesome.
Sorry, everyone.
No. Your slides. I'm a geek and data nerd myself. Your slides were phenomenal. And that was really over the top. Please make sure we get a copy of those so we could reshare that. Everyone, yes, we'll try to get a copy of those from Saul for you. We'll put that link up on our website at CEMTF.org. I also want to thank you again from my heart, but for coming from 4 a.m., which means you probably got online at 3 a.m. So don't cut yourself short there. And we could see the sun just now dawning over your shoulder as you had just.
That's right.
Here.
Nearly time for me to go and have a surf.
Right. There you go. We would normally take questions, but we're going to have to move right on to Dana Joya. But again, you can see in the chat, if anyone, you can see your applause in there. Congratulations. We really do appreciate all that you've brought here. And this is recorded, everyone. So you can visit, again, this recording of Saul's presentation on our website as well in the days to come. So thank you again, Saul, and really appreciate all that you do and your work.
Sorry, I went a little over time, and thank you all for your on-the-ground work. As much as we think this is going to happen at federal policy, this is going to be community by community, and it's about local building codes. And we need you all to turn up to utility regulatory hearings, and we need to overturn the utility monopoly.
There you have it. Well, thanks again, Saul. We really appreciate you.
All right.
And as I said, what better segue to, talking about moving that on a community by community basis and taking it up at the ground level or community level. It moves us right to a community that's been leading the charge here in the Bay Area, and that's in the city of Richmond. Next up is Richmond City Council member Eduardo Martinez, who I said before was there day one.
Amos,
Wait, that's right. We're doing John Joya. We're going to pick up here.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jack.
We're going to change the order. Yeah.
Just the same.
Is that okay, Eduardo? Is that okay?
Better than okay. It's fantastic.
Oh, good. Eduardo and I are colleagues. We work together.
Good, there you go.
Thanks.
Right. Yeah.
So John Joya, Contra Costa County Supervisor here. Please go ahead. And thanks for being here today and taking time out.
Thanks. And I want to first start by thanking Amos, you and Cheryl, Eduardo, the whole 350 Bay Area, all of you for really putting this on. These are great. And all of you, the over 100 people that are on this webinar, it's really been you at the ground level and the grassroots level that's really helped push these, is pushing policies to fight climate change. As someone who's been in elected office for a long time, I can tell you people matter, grassroots movements matter, and all of you push electeds to do the right thing. So I want to start with that. California wouldn't have moved forward with aggressive climate protection measures if it wasn't for the public and the people really pushing for that. So I really wanted to start with that. And I'm coming to you from my kitchen, because since we were talking about electrification, that's my that is my electric induction stove, which I've had now for about a year and a half. Great. I love to cook. It is just as good. It's better than cooking on gas. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that, since we are talking about the need for electrification. So I was going to talk a bit about about how we're moving forward both locally, regionally, and state, because they're all interconnected. And everybody here on this call knows that action is needed at all of those levels: grassroots, city, county, regional, and state. And so I also serve on the state California Air Resources Board, which is passing new regulations moving toward electrification. And I'll talk about how that fits with what needs to happen at the local level. And I did want to just start with a concept that I think is really important for all of us to think about as we think about our policies, is that we need to pursue aggressive policies in a way that are equitable and that also understand the plight of workers who are transitioning, the just transition. We can't just make these policies from a white middle class perspective. There has to be equity lens and equity consideration in all of our policy making on this. I come from Richmond. I live and represent the Richmond area, and many communities around this state, and I visited many of them, who are impacted by by air pollution from industry want to see the benefits for them as part of how we move forward. For example, how we look at building electrification, and we had a discussion about this at yesterday's Bay Area Air Quality Management District meeting that I also serve on, and that is, if we're going to offer incentives to people to retrofit their house for electrification, how are we making those opportunities, frankly, more available to lower income residents so that they can take advantage of them, so it's not just wealthier people who are able to do that transition. So and then with workers, it is important in our own county, in Contra Costa, there's 4 oil refineries. One is already idled and is closing and converting to a renewable fuel facility. A second one has stated that a similar intent. So we need to think about how workers in those kinds of facilities, how we really help them transition to the clean energy economy jobs. Some of those jobs are available now. Some of them won't be available more into the future as we transition, but we can't forget them, because I think to have greater public support for what we do, we can't leave workers behind, and we have to address our environmental justice communities around the state as well. In fact, yesterday at the California Air Resources Board, we passed a resolution saying that we support the California Energy Commission moving to adopt in their new building code standards, which would take effect in 2022, requirements for electrification of appliances. And that is where I don't know if they're going to go in that direction, but that's clearly requiring that statewide is where we need to go. And it's been great that cities around the state have been passing their own REACH codes to allow this. The single most important thing we can do is get the California Energy Commission to do this. So next year is early part of the year is it continues the public process, the input. I think this is a chance for all of us to weigh in and push the Energy Commission to adopt those in that standard. Then every city doesn't have to go try to do it themselves. We'll have this as one uniform rule statewide. With regard to the retrofit, I'm going through that process myself, and I've talked to a lot of people who've done it and organizations, including the Rocky Mountain Institute. It is not easy. We don't make it easy to do this. We need to do a better job, and we've had that discussion at the Air District. How do we offer subsidies or incentives, be a resource? Because it is expensive and difficult, especially if you need to upgrade your service panel. And clearly the low-hanging fruit is to require this in all new construction, which is what this building code change would mandate. If we can get that through next year, that all new construction would be would have electrification. For existing homes, especially older homes, it's more challenging. So we need to sort through how local governments, how local air districts can offer opportunities and make it easier for people to do that. The governor came out with a pretty ambitious executive order a few weeks ago that calls for greater electrification transportation. It's great. His executive order calls for all new cars sold in California starting in 2035 to be zero emission, and basically directed the California Air Resources Board to develop the regulations to do that. So I'm looking forward to being part of that and doing that. He also addressed trucks. Actually, a lot of what's in his executive order much of it has been done through a regulation, a new law that we passed a couple of months ago that basically requires the heavy duty trucks and vans for delivery and things like that sold in California on a scale to ramp up zero emission. So that by under that regulation that we passed, half of all trucks sold in the state in 2035 would be zero emission, moving to 100% by 2045. Those take up longer because the technology is is developing. It's there, but it's still being fine-tuned for heavy-duty loads. The one area that would get sped up are trucks from ports, because like in the trucks that go through West Oakland, impacted communities, those would all be 100% by 2035. We passed a regulation also about, I think about 2 years ago, that requires a ramp up that starting in 2029, and again, it's a phase in to 2029, 100% of all buses purchased by transit agencies in California in 2029 are zero emission. And then as their fleet gets replaced, it becomes in the early 2040s, all 100%. And that it's a 50% requirement in 2026, so it ramps up. The point of all of this is that by pushing the transportation sector to only sell, and they can do it, they know it, that they sell zero emission vehicles, that creates greater investment in that technology. In a sense, these regulations are meant to drive technology change. Costs are coming down, the life cycle costs come down. In the meantime, we need to provide more funding and subsidy and opportunity and investment for lower income communities to access these vehicles. It can't just be, again, people who can afford them. And so the Air Board has put out a number of grants to agencies around this, to nonprofits around the state, to develop zero interest loan or grant programs for lower income residents to be able to buy new or used electric vehicles or hybrids. We need to do more on that. And I already we're seeing, I think, an investment in new manufacturing in California. In fact, there is a large union bus manufacturing plant down in Los Angeles County in Lancaster that manufactures electric buses. It's called BYD. I think these kinds of regulations are going to result in more investment in those types of facilities in California to be able to create more jobs. And what can we do at the local level? Local government needs to make it easier to permit, for example, someone who's going to do a charging station at their house. And already there's many cities have passed under a state law new, more streamlined processes. So there are a lot of things we can do. And I know my colleague Eduardo will talk about sort of some of Richmond's interest. So I think cities and counties need to continue to play a role to push regional agencies and state to do more, because a lot of the innovation comes out of the grassroots movement at the local level. I do want to also say that we need to make sure that we look for investments. The cap and trade investments, some are for cap and trade, some are against cap and trade. It was passed a while back before I got on the Air Resources Board. And I have some concerns about it as well. So we need to push to make sure that more of the funding from cap and trade is spent in environmental justice communities. There's a state law that requires that. We need to make sure that happens. Communities like Richmond and Oakland, for example, which are AB 617 communities developing a pollution reduction plan, are that more money is spent in those communities to both to help with job investment, health improvements, reducing pollution. And I just want to, and I want to finish with a shout out, because I want to be a creek. I don't want to be a fire hose, or I want to sort of be short here. Is in Richmond, and I'm sure you've heard about it, the great movement, Eduardo and others, the No Coal in Richmond movement, Janet Johnson and others, really made a difference by saying, we're going to we're going to stop coal from being handled and exported out of Richmond. And the city council passed an ordinance to basically phase that out, a pretty historic ordinance to prevent coal coming from Utah and Wyoming through streets of Richmond on trains and out through the port. So the grassroots efforts are a really important part of this. And so I'll just close with the action is needed at all levels, and all of you have really been a large part of it, and want to thank all of you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Supervisor Joya. Really appreciate that. And if you could hang along for what time you have,
Sure.
if you see in the chat, there's a host of questions and feedback in there.
And I'll try to answer some of them while I'm here. Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
good. But did want to point out, I know in San Mateo, colleague Vice Mayor, who had her question there of City of Millbrae, stating that she had been trying to get air monitoring devices set up in San Mateo County. And the theory is smoke from all the fires comes into the Bay Area and then blown and tucked up in the coastal mountain areas of San Bruno Mountain. But the question is, what the Air Board does is extrapolate particulate pollution based on one monitor in San Francisco alone and one monitor down in the unincorporated Redwood City. She says she knows her county reps on the district board, but can't get the quorum to get anyone to put in the tools to get the data to make planning decisions. That's Ann Schneider, Vice Mayor of City Millbrae.
And I can say something briefly on that if you want. Just that I'm fortunate in Richmond and San Pablo, since we are an AB 617 community that's highly impacted from industrial pollution. There have been investments by both the California Air Resources Board and the Bay Area Quality Management District for a large network of air monitors throughout the Richmond, San Pablo area. And it is true, the Air District has there are high quality air monitors throughout the Bay Area. We need more. We've started with the most highly impacted communities. If you go on the monitoring map, you will see, those of us, at least in West Contra Costa, get to see all those monitors. I think over time, there will be more. Again, the start has been from the most highly impacted communities from a pollution standpoint. I think more monitors are great. They're better. You can, under Purple Air, put up your own monitor. They're not as high quality, but they're still good. They tell you trends. So I think we're beginning to see even more. A lot of the monitoring has been around oil refineries and industrial facilities, but understandably, having more monitors in other areas where there are not those facilities are helpful too.
Good, thank you. And Ruskell, if you could unmute yourself and mention the network, the air quality network that people also might know about. I hope you're on board. And Purple Air is a great suggestion, citizen air monitoring network. And the feds are actually starting to pull data from that now because of the number of sensors that are spread all about now, pulling data. Ruskell, what's the name of the air monitoring network?
The Citizen Air Monitoring Network, and that's the one I was aware of.
Yes, and that's another open source air monitoring network. It initially started in Vallejo, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's another resource for the vice mayor or vice mayor as well as others out there. Thanks, Ruskell.
Happy to provide the info in the chat.
Thank you. Yes, drop the link in there. And interesting point, a data point in terms of people tying the economics from Saul's presentation to some of the points where Supervisor Joya really pointed out that it's really about the pressure coming from the grassroots up for policy change and really to give those elected officials the political will they need to make those harder decisions. And we saw some chats in here about where the pressure needs to come from. And I think as we do stay on point, we should continue to keep bringing in and being the grassroots organizations to help pressure our regional, our state, our county officials to make these policy changes. And tying that in with someone else's comment I was looking for, who mentioned about what had happened in Oakland in regards to their climate and energy group in terms of keeping it together. And I think that in order to keep this pressure and continue to build synergy we invite each and every one of you to literally join. That means to participate in our monthly Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force convenings. There we have our committee groups who will be drilling down on, from our legislative committee to our outreach committee, and even our program in terms of putting on these summits. There you can, again, continue these conversations coming out and through the summit, and in working with, if you will, your colleagues in adjoining adjacent jurisdictions and municipalities, so that we can develop these policies, co-develop these policies and solutions together. And this is the power of this organization. So we thank you all, and thank you, Supervisor Joya, for sharing your comments here and today. Thank you again. With that, I want to move us along to our final speaker here for this morning, this part of the session, who is Eduardo Martinez, Richmond City Council member here. Eduardo is, I think you're on. I see you here. There you are. Here. Good, good.
Okay, so behind me is land next to the AstraZeneca site, and I'm going to step over so you can see it. So this greenery hides toxins in the soil, but the AstraZeneca site is even more polluted. It's so polluted that a concrete cap had to be placed over the land. So the city is currently considering building on this site with a partial cleanup when a complete cleanup is actually necessary for the health of the bay. This issue ties into the climate emergency, in which, it ties into climate emergency in many ways. For instance, sea level rise will cause saltwater intrusion underneath this site, and the movement of the waters will move toxic plumes into the bay, making the bay more toxic than it already is. This situation wouldn't be, this situation would not be if we had regulated industry, making them responsible for cleanup for all their messes. Moving forward, we need to make sure that industry becomes fiscally responsible, fiscally directed to ensure a just transition from fossil fuels to renewables, to make sure that things are done correctly. I'm currently working with a team of environmental and legal experts and leaders to create an ordinance to establish an environmental risk bond in the city of Richmond. We will be working with activists to expand the risk bond concept to the county of Contra Costa. Without these bonds, the taxpayer is left at the mercy of industry for any environmental mishap. If another fire like the one that happened in Richmond happens again, the city and its residents shouldn't have to wait for cleanup efforts and shouldn't have to pay for it. Also needed are just transition bonds to cover cleanup costs after the refineries are decommissioned. We also need to map out how the decommissioning will affect the community economically and how will also counter the loss of revenue from fossil fuel production. This and many other issues must be considered. Transition is not only inevitable, but it's urgently necessary. Without planning for a just transition, a just transition is impossible. Without coordination, much effort and valuable time is lost. That's why organizations like this one is essential. That's why we need to continue doing the job that we're doing with this organization so that we can make each other cognizant of the efforts in the wider array of issues: environmental, social, economic, and cultural. In fact, it's these webinars that made me aware of the environmental bonds, and so we need to continue working together. So I know we're short of time, and I just want to thank all of the people who have helped me do what I do. Because if it weren't for the grassroots efforts of all of the organizations that have put me where I'm at and have given me the expertise as well as the support to do my job as a community member, we wouldn't be where we are. So thank you. I think we should move on. All right.
Good. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you so very much. And thanks for your continued work and advocacy in recognition of all that you do there in Richmond. Moving along, I would say we are again the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force for anyone who's joined since we first started. This is our fifth in a series of climate summits that we're bringing to you. And after right now this plenary, we are going to explore this question in more depth, breaking out into 4 workshops, one of each representing or which deals with the theme of our first 4 summits. Those workshops are in healthy cities, which looks at city planning, housing, transportation, resilience, ecological protection, public banking, defund the police, and Green New Deal. The second panel is fossil fuel-free Bay Area, speaking specifically on decommissioning the refineries and defunding the fossil fuel industry itself, community organizing against toxic pollution, as the council member had just pointed out to you. And then power mapping the air district, as we had previous comments also in regards to that question. That's our second panel, fossil fuel-free Bay Area. The third panel is green infrastructure, speaking about 100% clean energy. How do we get there? What does it look like? And then on building decarbonization, not building towards decarbonization, but building decarbonization, decarbonizing buildings, much like from the presentations of Saul there. And then electric vehicles and trucks, and that's within our green infrastructure panel. The third, and all these links will be put here in the chat for you to visit and go to. The fourth panel is our sustainable production and consumption of resources. Again, that's the sustainable production and consumption of resources. That's consumption-based GHG accounting. That's greenhouse gas accounting, gases accounting. It also will be talking with zero waste and on carbon sequestration, carbon farming, watershed and wetlands restoration, and then on climate literacy in schools. That is our fourth panel there. With that, as I said, please copy these links out, save them for yourself so that you can return here to the plenary. Again, we're the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. We're closing this plenary session and we'll see you in your panel soon. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we still have 58 people in the room, so that's amazing. I think the total I saw the most was 120 something, not sure, but I feel like today was another great event, and all the speakers were amazing. I want to thank all the speakers, all the participants, all the volunteers, Jack, Steve, Amos, Ruth, Abby, all the people that really helped plan all 5 of these seminars, series, because they've been absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to go back and view them all. I've only viewed a few so far, but they've just all been amazing. And I'm just really honored, happy, and blessed that we were able to pull this off and have such a large reach. As I think I stated earlier that we've so far touched 8 countries around the world, and we've almost 75% of the region, so 76 cities, there's 101. And Many of the organizations, we don't even know all the organizations because everybody uses different email addresses, and but we know we had a lot of EDUs, a lot of government agencies, and you know, the climate emergency mobilization will continue. We'll be meeting, our next meeting will be December 16th, the task force meeting, I believe at 5:30. We'll send you, if you're not on our email list, please send me an email at cdavila@cityofberkeley.info so we can add you. You can drop your names into the chat, your email addresses into the chat. If you haven't filled out the survey, hopefully that's in the chat as well. You can complete that. You can also call us at 510-981-7120 and we'll get back to you. My last week in office is the first week of December. December 1 is my last council meeting. So join in and say your parting words of wisdom to me. If you'd like, they'll have a ceremony or a part of the ceremonial calendar on the 1st, and the meeting starts at 6 o'clock. Also, I just want to thank the steering committee, all the people that have participated in all our meetings so far and events. We had the concert for the climate series. Now we've completed this webinar series. And I also wanted to thank again my son for motivating me to make climate first. Yeah, I think, and Amos for being the vice chair of the task force, and Ruskell, my assistant, Ruskell Kanyang, for all the work that he's done doing the minutes to the meetings, organizing the meetings, sending out all the announcements, and doing all the work that he does to keep me on point. Also, they're not here in the room, but my family for tolerating everything that they've had to put up with for this whole time. But I just want to thank everyone again, and I'll hand it back over to Amos. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. 1,000 thanks for, again, spearheading this, leading this, and leading the charge here in the Bay Area. We're on it, and this shall continue. And I'm sure we're going to see plenty of you and keep you close as we continue to develop policy, continue to develop this coalition, and move things forward here in the Bay Area. Again, my name is Amos White. I'm vice chair, serve at the pleasure of this group. To Cheryl Davila, Berkeley City Council member, outgoing. And in wrapping up for today at this summit, I do want to emphasize something Jack's put in front of us. It's please do click the link to complete the survey. We're asking, you know, our nearly 1,000 participants in this summit series if they would, you know, like to put their efforts forward or your efforts forward in terms of how we can remain, if you will, not relevant, but effective. As we had, advisement from Supervisor Joya as well as from Saul, where they both really pointed out that grassroots is where the change will be made, or the greatest change will be made, and where the pressure really needs to come from, and pushing policy forward, and where the change will have its greatest impact. So we asked you to get involved with us, stay involved, click the link that's going to be dropped right back here in the chat, and we would love to have your further participation as we move along. With that, I do want to say our greatest thanks to 350 East Bay, Jack Lucero Fleck, and his organization for really being here, especially for you, Jack, for all that you've done in really from putting this program series together and leading it as co-chair with Steve Nadell, who we definitely want to thank as well. You two have, for over a year and a half, really led the charge, as I like to say, in seeing these summits to fruition. Again, for those of you who do want to help us develop our next series of summits for 2021, again, I ask you to visit our website, sign in to our newsletter or to get our updates. That way we'll get your email address and we can follow up with you from there. And if you are a participant today and you got the link passed on to you and you didn't sign in through the Eventbrite, I would ask you to also visit our website at CEMTF.org. That's Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force.org, CEMTF.org, and sign in there. That way you can stay up to date, but you could also get plugged in. If you didn't get a chance to visit one of the panels or to see that, two key things. One, you can follow up with folks from those panels by participating in our monthly, if you will, coalition meetings to move these policies forward to support the local and regional efforts that we do have ongoing here, as you heard Eduardo speak about in Richmond. And we also have other initiatives. And I saw someone even said they were interested in starting a statewide initiative. These are all good initiatives. And again, it will come from groups like this one. And we hope this one is playing a lead role, not just here in the Bay Area, but also here statewide and globally. Again, if you have any further questions, you could either drop them in the chat, they'll be archived, and or get in touch with one of us at the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force if you have our contact info. It's also on the website. Again, my name's Amos White. I do want to thank you all for participating today, and do stay in touch with us as we do move forward here in the future. Thank you again for coming. And with that, I'll turn over to Jack for a final farewell.
Okay, well, there was one thing that we came up with an idea at the last planning and logistics team meeting, which was we could end this whole thing with an actual action that we can all take. As Amos just said, we need grassroots pressure to make things happen. So Laura, are you prepared to lead people in this little action of sending an email to the Energy Commission telling them, hey, we want fossil fuel gas out of new construction? This is Laura.
I sure am ready.
Director of 350.
Hello, everybody. So we at 350 Bay Area are lucky enough to, include Jack and Steve and are, very excited about that. But we also are just starting a mobilization team that is helping us reach out. So I'm going to share my screen. What they've been doing are these action hours. So here's a little taste of an action hour. We can do it right now. We can do them all, or it'll probably take about 10 minutes. You can do some of it later. And it is pushing, whoops, can everybody see this? We've got the participants in the chat all over the place. Okay, so I included the link so you can hop on this document and then you can just do some copying and pasting. So the Energy Commission right now is working on the 2022 Energy Code, and we are asking them to require all electric new construction for some or all of new buildings. And yesterday, the Air Resources Board called on them to do that as well. So we've got some heft. So you can see that right now, California has the most aggressive climate goals, arguably, of all the states, but we are also adding the most new hookups for natural gas to new buildings. So this has to stop. It's insane. So you can see that we've laid out the arguments here. Burning methane in our buildings is making people sick. Continuing to extend this infrastructure strands that for the providers. That's an expensive investment in capital. In fact, PG&E testified for the Berkeley, most people know this, the Berkeley gas ban, because they're like, yeah, we don't want to invest in all of this stuff. And then it also leaves new homeowners and new building owners, building operators in the situation where they're going to have to retrofit if California is going to meet the goals. So we already have as you know, a huge goal to decarbonize all the existing housing and building stock. The fact that we're even considering adding to it and are adding to it every day is just sheer madness while we're making people sick with this nonsense. So I do want to give a hat tip to the PR folks who developed this notion of clean natural gas. It's the biggest con that's been pulled on people in it's been what, 50 years of this long con. So you can see it's laid out. You can send this email. And I gave the email addresses here. And then you can tweet if you're a tweeter. And also, if you click on the docket link that's under the email addresses, you can work your way through that system and become a formal contributor to the proceedings. That's pretty exciting. Pretty straightforward. Maybe do that while we're all online together because it might be a little confusing. Any questions?
Well, I could just say I've done this. The youth mobilizing team calls these their power hour, and I've done it twice with them now. And the first time I did it, I was really panicky because I was like, "Oh, how am I going to figure this all out?" And I'm getting better because, like today, I've got that document. The link was in the chat, and you can paste the two email addresses into an email, and then just copy the whole text that we want to send, and then copy the subject line and send them an email. So that's what I just did. And while Laura was talking, I did the whole thing. So I'm getting faster at it. And every time you do this, you get better. So we've got like 50 people on the line. Hopefully we can generate a bunch of letters because this, like Laura said, is really timely. There's a lot of focus on the California Energy Commission right now and trying to get them to adopt this all new electric buildings ordinance the way Berkeley led the way on. So that would be great if people can just take a few seconds here to do it. That would be wonderful. And it's
Also,
a nice way, I think, it's a nice way to end our 5 sessions where we've done a lot of talking. So now here, let's do an action. Let's actually take an action that we can actually try to make something happen here.
And if you sign up to receive our notifications from 350 Bay Area, you'll get notified about the next Power Hour, which, by the way, is organized and led by youth and young adults. And they are pretty energetic. And some people like us, a lot of us, it does take us a while to get up to speed because the younger people just tear through this stuff, but these documents stay up forever, basically, so you can kind of chip away if you end up falling behind. They're very fun hours and respectful of our activist time. So thank you very much. Back to Jack. I'm gonna disappear.
Well, I think I'm done. Thank you, Amos and Cheryl, for both being the great leaders you are. It's been really fun working with you, and I'm looking forward to more of the same. We haven't scheduled any more summits. Thankfully, I need a little breather, but we'll see what happens, with the new year, and we'll try to make everything happen that we possibly can.
Good. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, everyone, again. There's some links I copied out from other people's and emails and calls for action that I copied out and dropped in and reiterated again. And again, if you haven't, complete the survey that Jack had in there for our Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. It's in there as well. Just click that and just run through it. It's a quick 2-minute survey. Give us your feedback. We do want to continue not only this, but to continue to make this better. And we can only do so with your feedback there. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Stay safe as we are for the next 30 days in a COVID shelter in place from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. So everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and stay engaged. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. And I just sent my email.
Yay, thank you, Cheryl.
All right. Have a
Okay.
blessed day.